You know that saying that everything happens for a reason. Most people doubt it. They believe mistakes are just failures, meaningless mistakes. But what if I told you that one of the greatest successes of a man's life began with a ridiculous error? Yes, he simply took the wrong bus. Nothing mystical, nothing planned. A simple oversight, a second of distraction, and voila, he was off the usual route. But what he didn't know is that, at that moment, the universe was shouting. A silent, yet clear cry, "You are ready to change." While many would spend the entire journey complaining, he decided to observe. While others would desperately search for a way back to their comfort zone, he let himself be guided by an ancient intuition, buried under years of routine. The result? An unlikely encounter that became a turning point, a simple conversation that revealed forgotten talents, an opportunity that seemed small, but opened doors he never would have dared to imagine. And all of this, you see, began with a mistake any of us could make on an ordinary day. This story goes against everything you've learned about success, purpose, and destiny. It will show you that detours are often life's secret invitations, and that only the brave or the attentive enough can hear them. In less than 40 minutes, you'll understand why stopping fighting the unexpected can be the smartest and most liberating decision of your journey. It's not just about him. It's about you too. Are you ready to discover what your mistake is trying to tell you? That morning, when the sun was just threatening to break through the gentle fog of Boston's quiet streets, an ordinary man with hurried steps and a mind bogged down with worries made a decision without thinking twice. As he turned the corner, distracted by the noise of his own thoughts and the weight of his suffocating routine, he got on the wrong bus. Yes, a small detail, almost insignificant at first glance, but one that would later reveal its transformative depth. Life, with its subtle intelligence and its surprising way of rewriting destinies, used a slip-up to open up a new universe before him. It was as if the universe, in its infinite wisdom, had orchestrated that failure with the care of someone preparing a gift wrapped in misleading paper. There was no sign, no premonition, only the force of chance guided by something greater. And, in that instant, the man took his first step toward a new path, even though immersed in the purest ignorance of what he was about to experience. There, unbeknownst to him, began a journey marked by courage, resilience, and the power of hope. It was a day like so many others, but there was something in the air that escaped logical perception. That man, who every day took the same bus at the same time on the same sidewalk, with the same driver, today found himself off script. And not because he chose to, but because life decided for him. And how can one resist when life itself takes the reins, even through a silly mistake? It's in these moments that humanity shows its most sensitive side, and understanding the unexpected becomes a valuable skill. On that uncomfortable bench, still unaware of the full extent of what had just happened, the man felt a slight unease, a strangeness that whispered something was different. It was the beginning of the discomfort, but also the harbinger of transformation. What seemed like a mere mistake would soon take shape as a story that would inspire many others to believe in the possibility of change. Amidst the solitude of his thoughts, there was the embryo of something greater, the possibility of a new perspective on one's own existence, awakened by the simple audacity of missing the bus. It's amazing how fear disguises itself as routine, and courage sometimes hides in accidents along the way. Ultimately, the greatness of this misguided choice lay not in the bus itself, but in the rupture it would provoke. And this is not seen in the moment. It is only understood later, when the dots begin to connect. It is like a domino falling, and with it an entire structure of certainties that previously seemed unshakable collapses. That man, until then accustomed to the predictability of everyday life, was now a passenger in his own restlessness. The mistake, which would be a source of frustration for so many, was the trigger for a change that would require more than direction from him. It would require affection for himself, confidence in the journey, wisdom to see beyond appearances, and, above all, empathy for the signs life sends disguised as failures. The power of kindness would reveal itself later, but its seed had already been planted, because there is no way to experience a new destiny if you are not willing to lose, even momentarily, the security of the known. And as the bus drove through streets he had never seen before, the adventure began, shrouded in a haze of insecurity and a spark of inspiration that would soon become a flame. It was just the beginning. Time passed slowly. With each new corner, each unfamiliar street, a pang of unease grew within him. The man who until then had kept his eyes wandering absently out the window now fixed them on the signs and plaques as if trying to decipher, a riddle slipping through his fingers. His heart raced unceremoniously, and his mind, racing wildly, began to conjure up scenarios of loss, delay, and irreparable error. Anxiety, silent and insidious, began to whisper in his ear the words that hurt most. "You are lost." It was at that moment that he experienced one of humanity's most universal and least accepted emotions: fear. The fear of not being in control, the fear of not knowing where he is, the fear of not knowing who he will become when all this is over. And paradoxically, it was at that very moment that life began to strip him of what no longer served him. The illusion of absolute security. Resilience begins in uncertainty. Emotional intelligence arises when we accept that not everything needs to be under our control. He looked around like a castaway cast ashore on an unknown land. He didn't recognize the faces, the names, the sounds. Everything was new and therefore threatening, and there was no GPS that could solve it because what he faced wasn't geographic, it was internal. The greatest challenge wasn't the itinerary, it was the emotional journey. It was the battle between the old routine and the new world that was looming. The loneliness that accompanied him wasn't due to the absence of people around him, but to the feeling of being displaced, disconnected from everything he knew. Humility knocked on his door, and he welcomed it without knowing it. It was humility that would allow pride to give way to flexibility, to adaptation, to understanding what is not immediately understood. Life, with its relentless generosity, presented him with a scenario where he would have to relearn how to trust. Trust his intuition, trust time, trust the process. It was an experience of humanity in its rawest and truest form, and that, though harsh, was a gift. He could have gotten off at the next stop. He could have asked the driver, signaled, expressed despair. But curiously, he didn't. There was something in that discomfort that, though painful, was also intriguing. It was as if the universe was testing his ability to remain even when everything screamed for him to flee. To remain with doubt, with insecurity, with the absence of guarantees, that is courage. This is a kind of adventure that many avoid, but few realize is the gateway to growth. By deciding to stay, even without understanding, man took a step toward emotional maturity. He made room for the emergence of hope, the kind that arises not from certainty, but from the simple desire that something good might emerge from chaos. And this desire, when nurtured sincerely, opens doors invisible to the hasty eye. What he didn't know there on that bench that now seemed more like a spiritual testing ground was that this anguish would be the prelude to encounters, revelations, and solutions that would change everything. A new page was about to be turned, while he was still struggling with the whirlwind of uncertainty within himself. Something or someone interfered in the storm. A calm-looking man sat beside him, with a light smile and attentive eyes, wearing simplicity with the dignity of someone carrying deep experiences. He didn't say much at first, simply greeting with a friendly wave, the kind that seems to carry kindness embedded in the gesture. But it was enough for the man, still immersed in the discomfort of the unknown, to feel at least a little welcomed. This first contact, seemingly banal, was like a gentle breeze that precedes the hurricane of meaning. The connection was established unhurriedly, respecting the time of those who didn't yet know that this stranger would be a key. The man, with a firm voice and calm tone, quickly realized that something was troubling his new companion. And, with wisdom not learned from books, he began to strike up a conversation, nothing invasive. Just a conversation between two humans, driven by sincere curiosity and the power of kindness. The next few minutes became more precious than years of words thrown to the wind. That man, who until then had avoided eye contact, found himself enthralled by an active and welcoming listening experience. For the first time in a long time, he felt someone was truly there, present, interested. That man's humanity was an invitation to reconcile with his own history. Without knowing why, the man began to speak. First, where he came from, then work, then family, and in the blink of an eye he was opening his soul. He spoke of frustration, stagnation, the feeling of living on autopilot. And the man didn't judge, didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it. He simply listened. There, in that respectful listening, understanding, respect and affection blossomed. It was as if time itself had stopped to witness the birth of a friendship that escaped logic and plunged into the realm of pure empathy. Human connection, when genuine, has the power to calm even the most furious winds of the soul. Suddenly, that bus was no longer a place of discomfort. It was a meeting place, a microcosm where two stories, once parallel, began to intertwine. The man began to share his own experiences, and what had previously been just an ordinary conversation became a mirror of lives. He spoke of losses, wrong, choices, twisted paths, and above all the ability to reinvent himself. He cited books like The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, which helped him understand the signs of the universe, and Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which reconnected him with his mission. He also mentioned the simple habit of writing letters to himself as a way to organize his inner chaos. The man listened to everything with the attention of a child. For the first time, he felt he didn't have to carry the world alone. There was generosity in the air. An unexpected encounter, yes, but charged with purpose. And without realizing it, that man was beginning to plant the seeds of transformation. What would come next, he still had no idea. The conversation, which began as a casual exchange of words between two strangers, soon took on proportions that not even the most skilled screenwriter could have predicted. The man, still processing the impact of that unusual encounter, realized that every sentence spoken by the man beside him carried more than just an opinion. There was a wealth of experience, emotional refinement, and wisdom shaped by pain and overcoming. And even more surprising was the number of coincidences that emerged throughout the conversation. Details of the old man's life echoed dormant memories in the man's mind, as if the conversation had been written especially for him. Both had faced periods of profound loneliness. Both had felt the weight of insecurity in the face of a cloudy future. Both at some point in their lives faced difficult choices, driven by fear, but permeated by a spark of hope. The conversation was a revealing mirror, and each word shared became a step on the ladder of inner reconciliation. As the exchange intensified, something even more curious emerged. The old man seemed to know the man's pain as if he had already experienced it, and indeed he had. He told of a time when, also by mistake, he boarded a different bus, and how that mistake led him to discover a gardening course that would transform his career and his emotional life. He spoke about the importance of initiative, the courage to break the mold, and how fear can be a guide in disguise. The man listened to him with wide eyes, as if rediscovering his own story through the story of another. It was as if the universe, with its intelligence and insight, had used that all-too-common scenario, two men sitting side by side on a city bus, to produce an experience of profound inspiration. The old man, with his welcoming manner, awakened in the other the memory of forgotten values: altruism, gratitude, collaboration, humility, honesty. Words that had seemed distant in his previous routine now took on new meaning. The conversation had become a compass, and like any good transformative dialogue, it brought not only reflections but also practical solutions. The man suggested the man create a new habit: active listening to himself. He recommended waking up 10 minutes earlier and doing a spontaneous writing exercise, jotting down everything that came to mind, without a filter. "It's like unclogging the drains of the soul," he said with a smile. He recommended books like Meditations by Marco Aurelio and The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz to strengthen emotional intelligence and open space for personal growth. He also suggested the practice of small acts of daily kindness, saying good morning to the doorman, complimenting a co-worker, helping a stranger carry their bags, as a powerful tool for realigning the heart with what matters. The man, previously disconnected from himself, felt something reasserting itself. The doors were opening not outward but inward, and as the bus continued its unlikely course, the journey took on increasingly symbolic contours. The destiny was not just geographical, it was human, spiritual, and transformative. The moment the man stepped off the bus was like crossing an invisible border. The air seemed different, denser, filled with sounds and smells he had never noticed before. He was in a completely unfamiliar neighborhood, and his eyes, still adjusting to the new landscape, scanned the streets like someone leafing through a book for the first time. The colorful facades of local shops, the murals with inspiring phrases painted by anonymous artists, the smell of fresh coffee mixed with freshly baked bread, everything there had a life of its own, pulsating. It was as if the city was presenting him with a new version of itself, hidden from the eyes of those who always walk the same paths. In this new place, he began to realize how routine blinds us to the extraordinary. For the first time in years, he felt genuine curiosity. That seemingly ordinary neighborhood proved to be a portal to new discoveries. And this new perspective was, above all, an act of humility. The humility to admit that, even lost, he was exactly where he needed to be. Walking. Slowly, he allowed himself to observe the people. There was a young woman reading a book sitting on the sidewalk, a group of young people painting a wall with vibrant graffiti, an elderly man feeding pigeons with a delicacy that betrayed a heart full of affection. Everything seemed to move in harmony, as if that neighborhood had been designed to welcome souls tired of living on autopilot. The feeling was one of welcome, as if respect for one another were a silent rule there. The simplicity of that place offered more than shelter. It offered meaning. And the man, who had previously seen himself as the victim of a mistake, now experienced the sincere joy of being pulled out of his routine. It was as if life, with all its compassion, had gently pushed him out of a bubble. And it wasn't long before he began to see opportunities where before he saw only problems. A small sign in the window of a bakery advertised a free community cooking class. Another, at the newsstand, spoke of weekly reading meetings and philosophical exchanges. The adventure was literally plastered on the walls. Each step revealed a new possibility. And it was precisely in this unlikely setting that he began to understand what it means to be truly present. His mind no longer wandered between regret and fear, but rested in the now. Observing, absorbing, learning. He realized he didn't need major upheavals or long trips to find inspiration. He just needed to change his perspective. With this new perspective, ideas began to blossom. He could participate in neighborhood activities, contribute his experience, learn new things. For the first time, he felt part of something bigger, enveloped by a sense of community he hadn't even known existed. It was as if the neighborhood was saying without words, "You are welcome." And this welcome awakened in him initiative, the desire to collaborate, to belong. That unfamiliar place quickly became a space for reconciliation with himself. He had barely begun exploring that new neighborhood when fate, with its almost theatrical perspicacity, decided to add another piece to the puzzle. While observing a small crafts fair set up in the central square, he was surprised by a voice, the man from the bus. There he was, chatting with a group of residents as if he had been part of the scene for decades. As soon as he saw him, the old man smiled with the naturalness of someone reuniting with an old friend, and with a discreet gesture, beckoned him over. The man, still shy about the day's discoveries, let himself be carried away by the fluidity of that reunion. Bluntly, the man introduced him to a woman who organized volunteer activities at the local community center. And it was there, amidst craft stalls and children running around the square, that the unexpected invitation came. "We're looking for someone to lead a creative writing workshop with the neighborhood youth. You write, don't you?" That simple question came like a ray of light at the end of a long emotional tunnel. For the first time, someone saw a dormant potential in him. His heart pounded. Insecurity tried to surface, as it always did, whispering doubts and fears. But there was something different about that proposal. It was more than a professional invitation. It was an opportunity to reconnect with his own essence. During his youth, writing was his passion, his refuge, his way of navigating inner chaos. Over time, the obligations of adulthood had suffocated that talent, burying it under the dust of routine. And now, like a gift wrapped in the understanding and kindness of others, that calling was knocking at his door again. The man on the bus, his eyes full of wisdom, noticed his hesitation and added, "Sometimes all we need is someone who sees in us what we forget to see." That sentence pierced the man's chest like a well-aimed arrow. It was as if the universe were offering him a second chance. The fear was still there, but something stronger was beginning to grow. Hope. Hope that the new path could indeed be better than the old. The woman in charge of the workshops explained that the meetings took place twice a week and that the neighborhood youth were thirsty for inspiration. They need someone to listen to, them to guide them, to believe in them, she said, her eyes shining with passion for what she did. The man felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of gratitude, responsibility, and excitement. For the first time in a long time, he realized he could be useful, necessary, relevant. The simple act of someone trusting him awakened his own dormant confidence, and this generated a current of positive feelings: empathy, courage, altruism. This was a real chance to transform lives, including his own. He still didn't know if he would accept it immediately, but the seed had been planted, and like all good seeds, all it would take was a little attention, a gesture of initiative, a drop of trust for it to blossom. The future, which had previously seemed like a repetitive road, now appeared as a bright fork in the road. And in the distance, far away, he began to glimpse a new destination approaching, silent and full of possibilities. That night, back in his small apartment, the man sat by the window, as if waiting for an answer from the stars. The invitation had been made. The opportunity was real. And now the decision weighed like an anchor on his chest. Whether to follow the new path or return to the old one lay an abyss of uncertainty. It was all too easy to return to what he knew, the predictable work, the indifferent colleagues, the mechanical routes. It was comfortable to resume the role of spectator of his own life. But something in him had changed. That neighborhood, those people, that man on the bus had lit a flame. The dilemma wasn't just about accepting an invitation or not. It was about redefining his own worth. And there, in the silence of that night, he understood that life was offering him a rare opportunity. The chance to choose consciously, to choose with understanding, with self-love, with emotional intelligence. A decision shaped no longer by fleeing from fear, but by trust in hope. The dilemma gnawed at him from within. And like every true dilemma, it couldn't be resolved by pure logic. It required listening to something more subtle, intuition. The man picked up an old dusty notebook where he had recorded dreams from a distant youth. He read amidst scribbles and daydreams phrases that spoke of freedom, purpose, and legacy. He realized with a certain shock that it wasn't the world. That had changed. It was he who had forgotten who he was, and this forgetfulness had chained him for years to a life of grayness. With this new perspective, he began to ponder. The new path offered risks, yes, but also the real chance for affection, collaboration, innovation, and fulfillment. The old road offered safety, but it was an invisible prison. He began to list what truly mattered: quality time, human connections, meaning, generosity, learning. The key words echoed in his soul like urgent reminders. After all, what is riskier, change or remaining stagnant? By dawn, the dilemma was still unresolved, but the man felt different. There was a faint light in his eyes, almost timid but genuine, a light born of introspection, of sincere listening, of self-honesty. He understood that although all external voices might point to the safest path, only his soul knew the true north, and that, to discover where that new path would lead him, he would need to take the first step, even if afraid. Overcoming obstacles isn't born from the absence of doubt, but from the courage to act despite them. And as he prepared the coffee, he smiled. A subtle smile, like someone who understands that each choice is, in fact, a seed. Once planted, it transforms everything around it. And although he hadn't yet responded to the proposal, something inside him had already decided. That man was learning that the best decisions are those that require courage, but also offer lightness. And soon, the impact of that choice would begin to reveal its first colors. The first day at the community center was like opening a window in a room that had been closed for years. The air was new, fresh, and the energy of the place pulsed with an intensity he hadn't even remembered existed. With a notebook in hand, and a cup of coffee kindly offered by the coordinator, he entered the small workshop room where 10 young people waited for him with wary eyes. It was like standing before broken mirrors, difficult stories, insecurities etched in their postures, distrust accumulated over the years, but all it took was a sincere look, an active listening, and the barriers began to crumble. He proposed a simple activity: write a letter to oneself in the future, telling them what they hope to achieve in 5 years. At first, silence reigned. Then came shy smiles, broken sentences, words stitched together with emotion. At the end of the first activity, one of the boys approached and said, "No one had ever asked me what I wanted to be." This impacted the man with a force no leadership position had ever given him. As the weeks passed, the meetings took on a new dimension. The man, previously lost among spreadsheets and emails that said so much but meant so little, now found himself confronted with narratives brimming with humanity. The young people shared difficult experiences, bold dreams, and above all, a profound desire to be heard. And he listened to them with empathy, understanding, and genuine humility. Each creative writing session became a sacred space for expression and connection, and in return, he received something incalculable: recognition. Not the formal protocol-y kind, but the purest kind. The gaze of someone who feels welcomed, seen, and valued. Amidst scribbled papers, spontaneous laughter, and discreet tears, the man began to rediscover himself. He discovered that his talent for communication, dormant for years, was more than a technical skill. It was a gift that fostered transformation. The impact was mutual. As the young people gained confidence, he gained purpose. The connections he formed there extended beyond the classroom. The center's coordinator recommended him to participate in a larger cultural project in partnership with local universities. He was invited to give a talk on writing as a tool for emotional healing. One of the students' parents introduced him to a publisher interested in social impact projects. It was as if, by saying yes to that opportunity, he had unlocked doors he hadn't even known existed. What had once seemed like a simple detour now proved to be a fast track to a completely redesigned future. He was experiencing the domino effect of courage. One action led to another, and each step generated new connections. This was more than success. It was fulfillment with a soul. Inspired by everything he was experiencing, he began writing about his experiences and publishing on social media. Quickly, his stories began to touch people from different parts of the country, generating dialogue, inspiration, and even invitations to collaborate. The wheel had turned, and the new direction was the one his heart had always known. Sitting on the same bench where weeks earlier he had met that mysterious man, the man contemplated the city's hustle and bustle with a completely different perspective. There was no longer any rush in his gestures, no noise in his thoughts. The silence was now filled with gratitude. Everything made sense. The mistake, the detour, the initial confusion, none of it had been by chance. Like a film carefully scripted, by life, each element fit together with surgical precision. He finally understood that the universe had conspired not to punish him, but to free him. That wrong bus was not the end of a line, but the beginning of a journey. A journey toward understanding, self-love, and the wisdom that only time and stumbles can offer. There, enveloped by sounds that had previously gone unnoticed, he saw the past not as a prison, but as a foundation. What had seemed like chaos was, in fact, divine order reorganizing itself from within. The destination is not what you expect. It's what you build with courage and dedication. As he mentally reviewed each step of this journey, from the moment he boarded the bus to that moment of peace, he realized how many small miracles had happened along the way. Every person he met, every seemingly random conversation, every unexpected opportunity, everything worked together for a greater purpose. The man on the bus, who until then seemed merely a good listener, had been a mentor in disguise. The young people in the workshop, previously seen as recipients of help, revealed themselves to be masters of humanity. The unfamiliar neighborhood became a loving home, where collaboration and inspiration blossomed naturally. The routine that once suffocated him now gave way to the adventure of discovering himself with each new day. He had overcome loneliness, overcome insecurity, and rebuilt his self-esteem based on solid values like empathy, respect, and perseverance. And understanding this, a gentle peace settled within him. For certainty without arrogance, a knowledge born of experience, he was finally in the right place. The revelation didn't come as a flash of light, nor as a grand epiphany. It came like a breeze, subtle and loving, blowing deep within his soul. The man realized that what we call mistake is often life's secret code to lift us from the mediocre and lead us to the extraordinary. How many people spend their entire lives ignoring the signs calling for change? How many resist the inner call for fear of the unknown? He had accepted life's silent invitation, and so now he was reaping the fruits of reconciliation with himself. With emotional intelligence, he recognized that the control he had so long sought was an illusion, and that there was a power of goodness at work in every detail of his journey. His talents had blossomed, his connections expanded, and his mission finally took on clear contours. The courage that had once been doubt became an anchor. Doubt in turn transformed into wisdom, and all of this, lo and behold, started with a wrong bus. But there was still more to learn, because fate was just beginning to reveal itself. When you look back, through the eyes of someone who has crossed an ocean of doubt, everything takes on a different color. The man, now transformed inside and out, no longer saw himself as a victim of circumstance. He understood, with a serenity, earned through scars and revelations, that life rarely follows the plan we set, and thankfully. Because it is precisely in the unexpected that the greatest treasures lie. How often do we persist on a path just because it's the one we've learned, just because it seems safe, just because it's what others expect? And yet it was in getting lost that he found himself. It was in his mistakes that he saw the way out. The world, with all its complexity and generosity, had prepared an eternal lesson for him. The true meaning of life lies not in the predefined destination, but in the journey lived with courage, curiosity, and an open heart. It was necessary to break the routine, face fear, and listen to others so that he could finally listen to himself. And this, perhaps, is the greatest act of love anyone can experience. The moral of this story isn't in a catchphrase, but in the raw experience of someone who had to relearn how to walk on their own 2 feet. How many people do you know who live their lives like those walking on rails, without deviating, without questioning, without noticing? This man was like that, a route follower, but the detour, that blessed detour, made him realize that the less obvious paths are often the richest in learning. He understood that resilience isn't about resisting until the end, but about knowing how to change direction when your heart tells you to. That hope isn't a passive feeling, but a daily choice. That intelligence isn't about always getting it right, but about knowing how to learn from your own steps. And above all, that humanity reveals itself in unlikely encounters, in sincere connections, in simple exchanges. What was supposed to be an ordinary day became a watershed. What was supposed to be a mistake became a lesson. And what was supposed to be routine became a mission. This is the magic of the unexpected. They transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. He continued his life, of course, but now through a new lens. Every detail began to be seen with more compassion, each person with more respect, each moment with more presence. He became the one who listens, who welcomes, who guides, just as the man on the bus once did for him. He multiplied what he received. He shared what he learned. He created connections where there had previously been indifference. He stopped simply existing and began to inspire. Over time, he understood that it wasn't the bus that changed his life, but the choice not to ignore the invitation hidden in the error. And this choice is renewed every day for all of us. Who hasn't felt lost, who hasn't thought they were on the wrong path? The difference lies in how we interpret these detours. Life is generous to those who walk with sincerity, to those who accept the imperfection of the process and move with their heart. And while the world tries to convince us that we need to have everything under control, that man's story reminds us, sometimes losing control is the only way to find yourself. And now that you know this story, the question remains, how many wrong buses have you avoided for fear of getting lost? How many opportunities have you let slip by because you thought it wasn't the right time, the wrong place, or you weren't you? The truth is, waiting for the perfect scenario is one of the greatest saboteurs of our destiny. Change rarely comes with warning. It arrives unexpectedly, disguised as a mistake, as discomfort, as a challenge. But only those who have the courage to remain attentive, present, and receptive can see the gift hidden in adversity. Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you've closed yourself off to new things out of sheer insecurity? Have you ever wondered if the path you call right is truly yours, or was it just the only one you were taught? What if you were one small mistake away from a life-changing transformation? Maybe it's time to start paying attention to your detours. To experiment more, listen more, trust more. Not everything needs to make sense immediately. What matters is movement. Action generates clarity. Clarity generates direction. And direction, when aligned with the heart, generates destiny. So tell me, what's the wrong bus you need to have the courage to take today? What off-the-beaten-path choice are you putting off? Share in the comments. Your story might inspire someone. And if you felt this video awakened something important in you, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and come with us to continue this journey. Here, every week, we have content made for those who are tired of surviving and truly want to live with meaning.